Welcome to a new edition of Yorkton Stories, where we look at Yorkton in area people and events, past and present. My name is Dick DeRyck. We appreciate the support of our premier sponsors, Harvest Meats and Grain Millers, both here in Yorkton, and others who assist us in many ways. Our podcasts are available on our website, yorktonstories.ca, where you will also find photos, links, and other information associated with each podcast when available. You can not only hear the stories, you can also see and read information about the podcast topics. We can also be found on all major podcast directories, including Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, TuneIn and Alexa, and iHeartRadio. Search for Yorkton Stories, you'll find us. For longtime residents of Yorkton, shopping in any store or going to any restaurant makes it obvious that the face of Yorkton and the faces of Yorkton have changed. Thinking back to the 1960s, Yorkton was undeniably a white community. There were immigrants, of course. I was one of them, but they were mostly white. Yes, family names of people involved in business and government provided evidence that a number of countries and languages were well represented here, with Ukrainian and German names predominant, along with those obviously originating in the British Isles. But those folks were mostly second or third generation. Not many of the actual immigrants who had settled the area were still with us in what were my early years in Yorkton. But that was then. I have not been able to locate census data from the 50s and 60s, but if memory serves me, the census consisted of someone coming to the door to find out how many people lived in the house and maybe their ages. More recent censuses provide more insight. In 2011, about 4% of the population of Yorkton consisted of immigrants who were born abroad and had emigrated to Canada. 5 years later, that percentage was about 10%. And in the latest census of 2021, it was close to 14%. Yorkton gained more immigrants as a percentage of total population than Saskatchewan or Canada over those 10 years. In 2021, according to the census, 42% of the immigrants living in Yorkton had come here from the Philippines. 14% came from India, 6% came from Ukraine, and others in order came from Nigeria, Jamaica, United Kingdom, China, USA, Pakistan, and Poland. The largest increases between 2016 and 2021 in countries of origin were Philippines, India, Jamaica, and Pakistan. And it hasn't slowed down. In 2023, Saskatchewan as a whole became home to more than 26,000 immigrants, a number far exceeding any of the previous years. Yorkton would have attracted its share of those new residents. Yorkton, founded by primarily English families, is now a multicultural community which people from as many as 60 different countries call home. We talked to 7 of our Yorkton immigrants about their experiences coming to Canada and Yorkton, about their likes and challenges being new here, and about surprises. All who we talked to came from warmer climates, so it should not be surprising how often winter weather came up in our conversations. All also work or have worked in Yorkton, and most have made this their permanent home, insofar as life is predictable. Laura Ben Bontao and her family are from the Philippines. Before she, her husband, and then 13-year-old daughter came to Canada in 2022, they had lived in Australia for almost 8 years. She is a coordinator at Suncrest College, and her husband is a registered nurse at our regional hospital.
Our motivations there were quite different when we first started planning to go to Australia and then planning to come here in Canada. For Australia, we were fairly a bit young then. Our motivation was really like, to experience how life is in a first world country. Growing up, I always know that I wanted to live that life that I have seen in television, in the movies and all. And it seemed like a very different lifestyle. So when my husband and I had the opportunity to go to Australia and sort of experience life in there, we grabbed it, you know, but it wasn't really a plan of staying there permanently initially. But when we arrived there, Australia, I have to say, is very beautiful. The country is beautiful. The people are actually very, very great as well and very welcoming. Maybe it was because we were in a bigger city and people were just a bit more open minded in there. But I guess, God has a different plan for us. We spent close to 8 years in there trying to get rooted and be permanent in there, but it just did not work out. And then I have a family who is here in Canada. I have a sister actually who lives here in Yorkton. That's what pushed us to explore the possibilities here in Canada. And the process in immigrating in Canada, I have to say, is a bit more clear. It has a clearer pathway. And as long as you have the skills, you have what is required, it is actually quite straightforward. And that's what we appreciated here. There was a bit more of a pathway, a clear way to achieve it. And there was a certain time frame that you could achieve it, if that makes sense.
You have a daughter who has now been through 2 major moves.
A lot of minor moves as well within those major moves, I have to say, because when we were in Australia, we did moved around. That was one of our concerns as well. She was in that age where you felt like she has to make those connections with people her age. You want her to be able to make the connections and have some strong foundation when it comes to building relationship. And because of our situation, we have no choice but to move around. So that was really one of our concerns, how it will affect her. What will be the negative effect on her end? But when I look at her, I think it helped in a way that it built a more rounded kid for us. Maybe that move helped strengthen her a bit, build her character, but it could have gone in a different route too, hey.
What do you like about where you are now?
What we really appreciate about living here in Yorkton is how it is a bit slower in pace, compared to where we were obviously from. When we were in the Philippines, we were living close to the city. There's a lot of people. When we lived in Australia, we also lived close to Sydney in also a bigger community. One time we were still fairly new here, me and my husband, we were both working good jobs already. We were working 8 to 4 type of jobs, hey? And one day, we just came home and we looked at our watch and it was 4:10 in the afternoon. And we were like, how are we home already at like 4:10? When we were in Australia, we work in the city. We live like 45 minutes away. We have to drive to the station. We have to take the train to our work. We have to walk a certain length, before we can get to our office. But here, everything is so close, which means that you have extra available time that could add value to your life. We could spend more time with our daughter. We could go for walks. We could go for biking, obviously, if the weather, permits. Not during winter, obviously, but it gives you enough time to spend on things that are more valuable, I have to say.
You just mentioned winter. For people who come from warmer climates, that was, or maybe still is, a challenge.
It is, but when we came in here, we came prepared. I mean, we prepared our mindset. We know what we were getting into to a certain point. Hey, we did not really know the winter was going to be that long and that cold. We came prepared. We did not came in here expecting the same lifestyle that we did back home or back in Australia. It's one of the reasons we moved, because we wanted to experience a different lifestyle. So I guess it helped that we were a bit more open-minded when we came in here. So our transition was a bit easier, I have to say, compared to some, because I do know personally of a couple of friends and a couple of other people that are really struggling, are lucky, or we just came a bit more prepared when we came here.
What kind of challenges are your friends, the people you know from the Filipinos? What kind of challenges are they running into?
I'm not reserving it only to my Filipino friends, but for those who come primarily in Asia, they have a bigger community of family and friends that surrounds them. Obviously the weather doesn't help as well. When you're lonely in here and the weather doesn't allow you to go out more, I guess they struggle in a sense that there's not much of a community that they are used to available to them.
Often it is things like either social clubs that are specific to a culture or nationality, or it is churches that
Yes.
kind of create a bit of a community where they feel more comfortable.
It's funny how you mention churches, because that is very, very true. Yeah. I mean, I guess me being a Filipino, I'm quite lucky that there's already a strong community present here in Yorkton. And there's also a strong church available for us in here. But for some who comes from a different country that doesn't really have that, as you mentioned, that click here in Yorkton yet, they will really definitely struggle. Now, I guess what really helps, and this is my experience, is there are organizations that are available here in the city that are also very active in trying to extend support, and I can't praise the newcomer office, high enough. And it's not because, I've worked there in the past, but I've seen I've I've seen all the activities, the commitment of the people in there to find something that they could organize so that the new people that are coming in who doesn't have an organization yet or who doesn't have a group yet be able to still integrate in some other ways, in some other organization that could help them get a bit more comfortable in this new place that they're hopefully going to call home for the long time.
Things like soccer, football, British football, soccer. It was not very prominent here, but it was largely popularized by immigrants. In the rest of the world, soccer is kind of the number one sport.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add, it will be basketball for Filipinos.
Oh, really?
Oh, 100%. There's a league for Filipinos for basketball, because basketball is very big for us. Basketball and boxing, those are the two biggest sports, for Filipinos. Basketball gets the people together. If there's a league happening, a basketball league happening here in Yorkton, you'd see people coming from Prisville, Porcupine, coming in for that basketball game. And it gets you connected to other people, like not just in Yorkton, it gets you connected to other people across all the other smaller towns too. And when they get together, it seems like they're just in the Philippines, and people look forward to it. And when they're together, it feels like home.
I'll tell you, I did not know that. I don't think of, don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think of Filipino people as being, 6.5 feet tall playing basketball.
You need to come in one of those games, Degwe.
I'm going to have to.
Yeah, you're right. You don't know what you're talking about. You should see the Filipinos in action when they play basketball. Players are also like very into it, and the people that are watching are so invested on it.
Katerina and her husband, Andrei Knatchuk, came to Canada from Ukraine 3 years ago. There they lived in the southern part of the country, close to Crimea, where the current war actually started in 2014 with the Russian invasion and takeover of Crimea, and where there is still very active fighting. They first lived in Watson, then Springside, but moved to Yorkton 2 years ago because of better job opportunities. Andri is a farmer and trucker, driving for a large farm operation in the area. The family grew 21 months ago with the birth of their daughter, Zoriana.
My husband, he had a military service in Ukraine during 2015-2016. When he quit from the army, he decided he doesn't want to stay in Ukraine. He decided to move. The first reason is the war, because it was already the war.
Yeah.
And the second reason, he decided to try himself in the agriculture because he had experience in Ukraine as a farm worker. Then he had experience in the USA. He worked over there 7 or 8 months. And then he decided to move to Canada and stayed actually here. So actually it was his reason, and I just supported him. So here we are.
You went to Saskatchewan, Watson, and then Springside, and then Yorkton.
Yeah, correct.
Did you have a choice? Did you come to Saskatchewan because you wanted to?
Actually, he had a choice to choose actually the Manitoba, Saskatchewan, or Alberta, because it's 3 prairies and agricultural provinces. But he decided to choose Saskatchewan because actually he had 2 years contract over there. Yeah, because he had a contract over there.
What was your first impression when you came to Saskatchewan?
Actually, my husband, he came to Saskatchewan in 2020, and I joined 1 year later into 2021, and it was end of September. I remember it was September in the southern Ukraine, where actually we are from. It's like a summer. Yes. And when I came to Saskatoon, I was thinking why it's so cold outside already, you know? I remember the trees, they were yellow already, and dry grass and everything, and it was cold. And then my first impression was why it's so cold over there? Yeah.
What part of Ukraine? What part of Ukraine did you come from? Further south?
Yeah, we are from south. We are from Mykolaiv city. It's between Odessa and Kherson. It's quite warm over there. September for us, it's 1 extra month of summer.
Were there any other surprises, things that you did not expect to find here?
Continue the topic about the weather. I didn't expect to have the winter during 6 months, I would say approximately. Yeah, because it was too long. The second surprise, I would say, it's not so much people over there, even in the big cities, even the Saskatoon, in Regina, it's pretty small community, because we lived in Mykolaiv. It's 500,000 city, we have a lot of traffic, a lot of people, and there is a lot of space, I would say, in the Saskatchewan. So it was probably my second impression, good impression, because where is everyone?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What have you found to be the good things about Yorkton, Saskatchewan specifically?
People here, they are so friendly and nice. Everyone really open and friendly, and I have a lot of good friends, because everyone asking about ourselves, about, I don't know, about our country. I don't know, if you need something, just let me know, invites us, and yeah, it's very nice and pleasant, I would say. And actually, probably this is the main reason why we are staying here in Yorkton and don't move somewhere to, I don't know, Edmonton or Calgary, like people like to do,
Yeah.
People is the most, the most good reason to stay here, because they are really nice.
Over the last 10 years or so, there have been quite a few Ukrainian immigrants come to Yorkton. Do you get together with other immigrants? Is there a social connection among immigrants from Ukraine?
I wouldn't say here in Yorkton, but I know it's a really good community in Regina and in the Saskatoon. Last summer we went to the Manitoba, the city Brandon, yes. And I know they are really very friendly, and they have really good community, because every weekend, any holidays, they are gathering together and support each other, I don't know, keeping the tradition and everything. I didn't see here in Yorkton, and actually I'm thinking maybe why don't start here in Yorkton, because we have so much Ukrainians who came like very, very long time ago, and Ukrainian who came recently. Yeah, don't gather together. Yeah, we actually, when we came to Yorkton, I was really impressed because like a lot of people then I met, they had Ukrainian last names, and I asked like, what's your last name came from? Ukrainian. My grandparents, my grandparents came from Ukraine, and we have that. And there, like, they are really close to Ukraine and Ukrainian. They are different, of course, because they was born here, but still they are like indicate themselves as Ukrainian. So yeah, for me it was like, wow, it's incredible. Yeah, and I started to discover what's going on, why so much Ukrainians here, and especially in Canora.
And that goes back to, 1895, 1900. It goes back more than a century.
Maybe a couple of months ago, I have found a book who was written by Ukrainian immigrants who actually came that years. It was 1904 or something. He describes as he was a boy and how his family moved from Ukraine to Canada, how it was here empty and everything. It was so interesting to read because actually they were the first Ukrainian who came to Canada and explore and discover, and it's interesting.
Have you run into any problems that you weren't expecting? Anything that was a real surprise?
I don't like to compare two countries like Ukraine and Canada. It's different countries. It doesn't mean that everything should work the same in both countries, but I was a little bit surprised by the health system and medicine here, because if you need appointment, you have to wait quite long, and even if you have emergency case, you also have wait. For me, it was a big surprise because in Ukraine, if you want something, you can have it next day. Right now, I don't know, it's much easier. I had pretty complicated pregnancy, but even with my complicated case, everything was good. I had very good treatment in Regina. My baby safe, health and everything. So I can't complain. Yes, it's a bit different, I would say, sometimes weird, but I didn't have like strange case, I would say.
Do you try and maintain cultural connection, the traditions, the feast days?
It's very important for me because I have pretty strong the homesickness, I would say, especially during some holidays, because in Ukraine they're very friendly and we gather together and have our, I don't know, and now I'm feeling a little bit like alone, To keep in tradition, actually, this is the way how I can be related to them, even through the long distance, So yeah, for the Christmas, I try to cook 12 dishes. It's Ukrainian tradition.
Okay.
For the Easter, I try to bake the Easter cake. So yeah.
Alejandra Baron and her husband and their 6-month-old baby came to Canada in the fall of 2016, settling in Saskatchewan, where her husband completed a master's degree in engineering at the University of Saskatchewan. Alejandra had worked back home in northern Mexico in planning and developing strategies for the sustainable use of water for the regional government. They moved to Yorkton in 2019 because of a job opportunity for her husband, and Alejandra now manages Triple P, a parenting program operated by SIGN, the Society for the Involvement of Good Neighbors. And the family is now larger by 2. Why did you emigrate?
Why? That's a very good question. When we were coming in the airplane, the people sitting beside us, they say like, you know what? I think you're coming in the wrong direction. We all go that way. Like, why are you coming this way? And to be honest, it was just about a dream. It was about a dream. It was looking for a better future for our family, my husband and myself and our little baby girl. And it was just looking for better opportunities.
You could have gone to the States. I mean, you had other options than Canada.
Yes, But you know what? We came on a trip before getting married to visit his cousin. She lives in Montreal, and we fell in love. It was beautiful. It was nice. It was summertime, I must say. So it was wonderful. We really loved the culture, and mostly I need to say it like because when you cross borders, you can tell, especially from the people, if they're welcoming, if they're respectful, and to be honest, like it was quite a difference crossing the US border than crossing the Canadian border. For us, it was a more respectful and a more welcoming country from that point of view. And yeah, it was a wonderful place to be. And yeah, that's when we started working on the project for a couple of years. We got married, and then yeah, we landed here.
You spent a few years in Saskatchewan while your husband finished his studies. Why Yorkton? Was that job related primarily?
Yes, it was. We came to Yorkton because he got a job offer, and to be honest, like we moved. It was January, so the worst time to move. Honestly, everything was like frozen. It was so cold. It was not our first winter though, but coming to a new city and during the winter time, that was challenging for us. But then you start getting to know your neighbors and then the community and start making relationships and stuff. And then when we came here to find a house and a place, we were very excited. Found that the right size of Yorkton for raising our family and our family project. No regrets.
Was language a barrier, or did you speak English in Mexico?
I wouldn't say like language has been a barrier. I would say more so the communication in a way that like isolation, especially during the winter times. Like you may have a wonderful relationship with your neighbors, but you only see them shoveling the snow, coming in and out of their houses to get in their vehicles. And that is it. There's no more than that. So having those chances and opportunities to meet with others, that's what made it like a real challenge. And I came into meeting Sign because of the Family Research Center, and actually was connecting with the library first. It was the first, the library, because when we were living in Saskatchewan, the public library was a place for us to be all the time, because it's an extension of your home. When you're a newcomer, you might live in an apartment that is small, and when you have kids, you need a space like that where they can be excited about new toys and about books and about other people, and hearing stories and making friends. So we came to the library in Yorkton. Coralie, she just kind of said, like, you know what, you and your family need to go to this place, the Family Resource Center, and you're going to love it. So I had a baby and a 3-year-old daughter, so a toddler and a baby. So I came there, and it was fabulous, like making those connections and relationships that I still have, friends that I'm still friends with. So that was such a blessing.
Surprises? Any surprises, that things you didn't expect?
We've been very blessed with the people that we've met so far, to be honest. Like because when you are leaving your family, I'm very close with my family. So there's always that fear of what's going to happen. And especially like the relationships that you're going to have to build up from the scratch. We have had wonderful neighbors. All of our neighbors, I love them. They're fantastic, like retired couples now on both sides, and they love our children. They have special treats for them for Halloween. They look after our kids. They just bring treats. They're amazing. They're amazing. We're friends with them, and we love their pets. And it's just that familiarity that you would not expect to be that natural.
Did you have that at home in Mexico?
You know what? Like, people in Mexico are very friendly. We're very open, and we're very but like here, what I love is that people are very respectful. So in Mexico, sometimes you might be annoyed by your neighbors. You might like them, but you might be annoyed because they're parking in the front of your house, and you don't like that, of course. And here in Canada, that would never happen. They're friendly, but they're very respectful of your boundaries, of your space. and you can have both. And back home, you might not have that. They might hear music very loud because we're loud. We make parties and they sing karaoke, and you're like, hey, you're being too loud. It's 3 a.m., so don't do that. And you don't have that here in Canada.
You have now 3 children, 2 of them born in Canada. How do you maintain, or do you try to maintain, their connection to culture, to food, to the customs from back home?
That's a very important thing for us as a family. For example, we do speak Spanish at home. I just kind of have a rule, and it's hard to keep, but just that language, I think it's important to maintain. We do our best, our very, very best, to go as often as we can back home so that kids have that opportunity to witness that and to live that and to do all the things and taste all the flavors and stuff from the original stores. And as much as we can, we try to replicate that here with the ingredients and with the things that we have available here, so that they have that food and relationships as well. We have found a few couples from Mexico and some others that are, one is Mexican and he married a Canadian. And, we have this community and we will gather together. We just had a family gathering about Independence Day on the 15th September. So we all brought food. We were wearing our dresses and costumes and stuff. So we do try to keep those traditions. I will do, for example, in January, tamales and a special treat for the kids. Yes, just making sure that they are connected, that they feel that that's part of them as well.
You mentioned other people from Mexico or Central America. Or how large a group is that in Yorkton?
There's 15 of us.
Oh, really?
Yes, with kids and all. And there's people from Colombia as well that join us for some gatherings, and from Peru.
Tanika Walker worked in a bank in Jamaica, CIBC, a familiar name, for 17 years when she decided she wanted to see more of the world and try a new career. Having been involved in organizing events and activities at her bank, and having an aunt in Ajax, Ontario, who she visited and who encouraged her to move to Canada, she decided to do 1 year of postgraduate studies in events management in Toronto, starting in 2018. Why did you emigrate to Canada?
It was me at home working in the banking sector for almost 17 years. And I started when I was pretty young, and then 17, before I knew it, 17 years flew by. And I was like, what's happening? I never wanted to be in banking. I was like, I think it's time now to change my profession. And I was like, okay, what exactly do I want to do? When I was I'm at work and I am there, I am also instrumental in planning things at the bank. So I love doing that. Planning, getting things coming together. I love seeing that. So I was like, you know what, let me try and do event management. I think I love doing that. So every summer I would visit my aunt here. She lived in Ajax at the time. She always wanted me to come here and live full time instead of just coming for 2 weeks or 3 weeks on vacation. She was like, why not come here? I was like, okay. I wanted to change career. My aunt is inviting me to come to stay with her. And I said to myself, because education is key and it's something you want to learn to cannot unlearn. So I was like, okay, why not kill 2 birds with 1 stone and just have an international experience in terms of changing my career. So that's when I decided, okay, let's go internationally and learn a new profession. So that's where the whole thing started with me, not just to migrate, but just to come and get the international experience. If being here and it doesn't work out for me to stay here, I was happy to go back home. At the time when I was going through the process of learning what it involves to come here, to go to school, I had somebody at the bank where I was working. One of my coworkers, she was migrating as well. She was migrating and so she was coming to Saskatchewan. At first, I only knew of Ontario, of course, Vancouver, all those, the larger cities, yes, those are popular. Yeah. So back home in Jamaica. So I was like, where's that's what I could not pronounce the word to save my life. So anyways, She came here a year before I decided to go to school. So she was here. And after I finished school, I was there applying for jobs, didn't get any at the time. And she was like, why not come to Yorkton? I was like, oh God, I hear it's very cold there. I don't want to. And she was like, I'm here and I'm learning to live with the cold. So anyone can do it. So I said, sure, why not? The biggest decision for me was to leave my job at home, which was working in the bank at home is very secure. You're getting all your pensions, all your benefits. And if I've decided to leave that, I'm not working in Toronto. So why not just come here and see what can happen? So that's when I came here. I was staying with her at first. And the first week of being here, I saw the job posting for the film festival. At one point, I said it was fate. But I saw all the listing, the requirements. And I was like, I fit every criteria here, except for I'm not driving. And then I remember, like, back at school at Umber, one of my teachers saying, when somebody posts the requirements for a job and they list all their criteria, they normally list ideal candidate, but they know they're not going to get everybody that fits all of the boxes. So it's not to deter you not to apply if you don't fit all the criteria. So I was like, okay, I think I fit almost everything there except for the car. So I applied, I think, the Friday or the Wednesday. By the Friday, I got a response to say, come for an interview. By Wednesday, I heard back from the film festival to say, hey, you're hired. But it was a temporary position, of course. It was 3 months. COVID came, needed me for an extended period of time. And then I was like, well, I see the opportunity here based on the immigration requirements in the field that I've studied, which is a branch of event management. I'm working the hours that will be required for immigration. So I just approach Brandy and just say, hey, are you able to assist me in terms of if I do plan to stay here to file for my permanent residence paper? And she was like, what is that? How do I do that? And I just did my research and I walked her through the step and she was willing to. And I thank God every day for that she was willing to assist me in that regard. So that's how I officially migrated here. Right now, I'm a permanent resident.
Resident.
Yes, and I'm hoping by next year, between school and being a permanent resident, I can do the citizen exam.
Many people in Canada go south in the wintertime because they don't like the winters. You came north in the winter time, which seems a little counterintuitive.
I know.
What has been your experience and impressions of winter? Was it difficult at first?
When I first decided to come here for school, as I said previously, I was coming for just summers and it was beautiful. Love summers. And I was like, you know what? If I'm going to be coming here for school, I'm going to go through a winter. So I need to actually experience a winter. So I did that in Ontario. And I kid you not, it was always gloomy. And I was like, it's just cold. It's gloomy. There's no sun. And I was like, oh God, I need to go home. When I came here in Saskatchewan and going through my first winter, what struck me, the difference between here and Ontario was that the sun is out. I mean, don't be fooled. It's still cold and even colder outside. But the sun has a big impact on how I experience winter here. And I guess if there's a positive to say, helps me in terms of how I experience winter here.
What have you found that is most to your liking in Canada, in Yorkton? What's the good and what are some of the challenges moving from Jamaica to Canada to Yorkton?
I would say I'm not a typical Jamaican because a typical Jamaican loves partying, loves to be out every weekend, going, having fun. I am a homebodied. Being a homebodied person, I found it easy to transition here with the slower pace of Yorkton, even Canada. Yeah, I love the quiet. I love the peace. So it wasn't as difficult for me to transition here. There is a nightlife in Yorkton, but it's not what I'm used to back home. So I'm not really missing anything, I think. So I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprises?
Yorkton is as I said, slow pace, and transit, like going places, it's not easy. So commuting is really not easy in Yorkton. So I still walk, and the good thing about it is everything is not as far. What surprised me is, like, when I first started walking and going to places walking, I think I was like the only person in Yorkton was walking. That's how I felt at the time.
For many immigrants, keeping in touch with fellow countrymen and women who have also come here and keeping in touch with their culture is important.
There's a Jamaican group here for sure. It's typical Jamaican, like the hustle and the bustle of the cities. So when they do come here, after a while, they do leave and go to larger cities. So we have people here from Jamaica that are still living here, not choosing to go to the larger cities. And I met most of those people at church. We do tend to get together for church, of course, and like cookouts and try and meet as a group to go somewhere. Try to keep our culture alive. When it comes to food, though, a lot of stuff that I normally would not eat back home on a regular basis, that's what I'm finding I'm missing the most here in Yorkton. I'm not really a big fan of fish, but I'm dying to eat some escovitch fish. That is a specially prepared fish in Jamaica with a lot of spice, I did call it. It's very hot and I love it in terms of how spicy it is. I find myself missing those. Things like green banana, I don't think you guys eat it here, but that's a normal staple in Jamaican also. I find myself missing those too. There are some ingredients here, Tank, especially jerk chicken.
Yeah.
We do find the products for that here. The sauce is here, so we can keep that strong tradition of the type of food that we normally eat at home.
So what food have you found in Canada, in Yorkton, that you didn't have in Jamaica that you like?
I do like pierogi. I will eat it definitely for sure. I do like it. So if I have to say one, that is one of them. Yeah.
Well, that's typical Yorkton.
Yeah.
You fit right in.
I fit right in with that one, for sure.
Pierogies.
Yeah. For sure.
Nathan Park is originally from South Korea and moved to Canada in October of 2021 with his wife and children aged 11 and 6. He worked as a supervisor at a co-op gas station for about a year and is now a full-time conductor at CN Rail. He also operates a tutoring business in Yorkton called Cube After School, which he initially started, he says, for my kids, but which has grown to support other children as well. Why did you decide to emigrate, A, to Canada, and B, to Yorkton? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, to be honest, everything started off when we were in Australia. We were thinking of settling down there. But when COVID happened, it wasn't too friendly towards foreigners and we didn't have permanent residency there. We were looking for an alternative place to go to. And Canada was open and our agency said you can choose from 3 of the cities. The one was La Ronge up north, one was North Battleford, and lastly was Yorkton. When I Googled a little bit and looked on Google Maps, Yorkton was the place to go.
What particularly about Yorkton? I can, La Ronge may have been a little too cold for you, but North Battleford and Yorkton are somewhat comparable, I think.
Well, Yorkton, I believe it had more facilities such as the Aquatic Center, the Gallagher. It had Superstore, Walmart, and all those big places for families to actually settle in better, I guess, compared to North Battleford, where they had just the bare minimum.
Families who emigrate with young kids naturally have concerns about how the young members of the family will adapt.
When we were going to Canada, since we were moving around a lot, we went to Australia first, back to Korea, and then we were telling him we were going to go to Canada. He was actually more excited having the opportunity to go see different places, different cultures. Knowing that we were going out of Korea, he was more excited than sad to say goodbye to friends because he didn't have too much of a term back in Korea when we were there for a year.
Did he find it difficult to get settled into school in a new country?
He's not the type to complain, but he had the first challenge he had was when he had to start picking up French, which was Canada's second national language. So I had to help him out there. I learned French when I was young too, so I had to help him out there and tell him this is Canada, so you've got to brush it up. He took it well, and now he's actually doing a lot better and made new friends. He seems to adjust a lot better since he's moved around at least once before coming here.
What were some of the challenges for the family, your wife, yourself, your kids, in making the move to Canada, to Yorkton?
Well, the first biggest challenge was obviously the extreme winters, long and extreme cold here. We came here about 3 years ago when it was really cold and there was snow, and I actually never told my wife when we were heading out that it was going to be this cold. I was afraid she was going to back away, and so I kind of hid it. It was a bit deceitful, but we brought her here, and she was shocked that it was covered in snow for about 5 to 6 months. The other part was that this place, the prairies, it's very different from the cities. They have their own culture, and it seems like the biggest difference is that cities have a lot of different facilities for entertainment and such for the kids as well. We're trying to dig for treasure. It's like where can we take the kids and what activities can we do? So that was another challenge my wife and I faced.
Any big surprises?
For me, not so much. I've traveled enough to take everything immune to all that culture shock. For my wife, loves to go out to bars. When we first went to some of the places here, it was very different. It was more like a cowboy style out of the movies for her. And so she was a little shocked at the kind of music that was played. She was describing just out of the movies almost. That kind of shocked her.
You're quite entrepreneurial. You started a business, or your family has started a business. What made you decide to do that? Do you come from a background that has been in business, or your parents, others in the family?
Yeah, my parents are a bit entrepreneurial themselves. They have a business back in India. But for me, the main reason why I started this was not looking for another source of income, but the main reason was that I wanted to provide an environment for my kids to have some kind of a tutoring environment where they do not study one-on-one with tutors, but they go into more like a classroom environment and they get motivated by other students who are also working, who are also studying. And so it was all around my children. I wanted them to, study a bit more and get more educated, which seems to be a bit lacking in the rural areas around here.
And your wife is involved in that as well.
Yes. So because her English is not as fluent as I am, she tries to take care of managing the staff, the rosters, and also providing shuttle service from the school to the after-school program.
But you're still working full-time as well as a conductor on CN trains.
That's right. Cube After School is a business that is focused more on helping the community, helping our children. But as a main source of income, I do work as a conductor at CN Rail. I've been working there almost 2 years now. I'm still very junior, but yeah, it seems to work out for me.
Do you try and maintain your Korean culture with the family?
I come from a very strong Korean culture. My parents, they made sure that I knew our culture, our history, and traditions. And so when I look at our kids, I try and help them remember how to be respectful in a Korean culture and remember some of the traditions. But at the same time, because we're living in Canada, I try and teach them what the basic manners and etiquettes are so that when we blend in with the Canadians here, it's more natural and doesn't seem too awkward. But when we meet elderly Koreans, we are also respectful to them, and I feel that's very important to everyone, actually.
Yeah. Are there enough Korean people in this area so that you have a group that maintains culture and customs?
Well, over the 3-4 years that I've been here, I've seen the retention rate of Korean people being about 30%. They're out of 10 people, 3 will stay and try and have a small business here, or they've already settled down here. But the other 7, because of their children's education, they tend to move to bigger cities. And right after their residential status is complete and they do not need to stay here anymore, they tend to move to bigger cities.
Are your intentions to stay here?
To be honest, I bought a house here thinking that we'd stay here a bit longer, but uncertainty looms here, and my wife got a job offer in one of the bigger cities, so she might go first. I will stay here as a backup just in case things go wrong and she needs to come back, and we'll see how that goes.
Do you have any estimate to how many Korean people might be in Yorkton and this area?
I would say I know every single Korean that lives in Yorkton.
Yeah.
And it would come to about 6 to 7 families. 6 to 7 families that are currently in Yorkton, and there are about 3 to 5 families that are in the towns encompassing Yorkton. Yeah.
Warren Leonard is a psychologist who, along with his wife Hanli and daughter Catherine, 10 at the time, emigrated to Canada and Yorkton in June of 2022. His father had lived in Vancouver, so Canada was not a completely strange land to them, and both he and Hanli had traveled extensively. We'll let him tell the story of how they ended up in Yorkton, where he works in the mental health field with Saskatchewan Health Authority. Hanli worked for SIGN, previously in the Family Resource Center, now in Family Preservation, and the family has grown by 1 with the arrival of Aaron less than a year ago. Aaron woke up as we talked, and as you'll hear, he was happy to join in on the conversation.
Both my wife and I, before we met, had spent time overseas. And when we met, ironically, back in South Africa, we had reached a point where we were having discussions about where we'd want to continue staying. And there is political instability, there is a lot of challenges. And for myself, from a work perspective, there was going to be a lot of changes. I was working for the Department of Health in South Africa, so much like the work that I do here now. But there was going to be a lot of changes in terms of how the government was going to regulate professions. And with that, they wanted to bring in certain things of controlling what professionals could charge. And their proposed rates was about 1/10 of the rates that everyone was currently earning. So I said to my wife at that point in time, listen, we've been speaking about it for a long time, about going somewhere else. I think if there was a time to do it, it's now, because I suspect that there's likely going to be quite an exit of medical professionals when they do implement that system. And I said to her, I'd rather be ahead of the curve than waiting for that curve to hit us, and then we're stuck having to compete with everyone else at the same time. Yeah. The reason we selected Canada is I have family that lives in Canada. My father's in BC, in Vancouver, and has been here for 19 years now. And he's always wanted us to come to Canada. And then we're talking about why Yorkton or Saskatchewan, and then subsequently Yorkton, is through the immigration process. It's a points-based system, and we were just shy of having enough points. And we had applied for a provincial nomination. So Saskatchewan had offered us the nomination, so they give us an additional amount of points, and with that, you have to come and work in the province for a period of at least 2 years. So took that opportunity, came, and then once we received that provincial nomination, started looking for work, and I'd been tracking jobs across the province. So there were a couple of posts in North Battleford and Moose Jaw, and then the one in Yorkton that had continuously been advertised and no one had taken it. And so I contacted the SHA about the Yorkton Post, and they got back to me about 3 hours later. And I'll never forget, the manager at the time called me and said, "Are you sure you want to apply to this post?" At which point I said, "Yeah, I'm quite sure." And she's like, "You know anything about Yorkton?" I'm like, "Not really. I've just a little bit of what we've seen on the internet." Then we sort of, we had an interview over the phone, over Zoom, and said, "Yeah, I'm interested. Let's have a look at it." And so they offered me the post, and that's how we ended up here in Yorkton.
And here you are.
Yeah.
This isn't the warmest place you could have gone in Canada.
There is that. I won't lie. I might have just run over the truth a little bit with my wife with regards to how cold it does get here in Saskatchewan. You know, it has great summertime temperatures. Look, it's almost the same as what we experience in South Africa. And she asked in winter. I'm like, it gets cold. And didn't mention the minus 40s and that too.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that was one of the things that might have surprised her about coming here.
To a point. I mean, like I said, we had been discussing it for a long time, and we were aware of those things. I just don't think she quite realized the length of time that we get stuck in our winter months and how cold it does get. Yeah. But I also have to say something that's quite interesting. I have not felt as cold since coming to Canada as I used to feel in South Africa. I think there's a lot to be said about, insulation and proper cold weather clothing and those types of things.
And a drier climate.
Yeah. But I feel that I used to feel a lot more cold when we were living in South Africa than I do when we're here. Canada as a country and as a people are very welcoming and very, very accommodating. But it feels it can sometimes feel like a very surface level greetings. So yes, they'll say hi, they'll greet you, you'll have a conversation, but in terms of actually being able to develop those in-depth relationships becomes very difficult, and there's a lot of hard work that has to go into doing that. I found that in South Africa, for instance, someone meets you and they almost try and adopt you immediately, bring you into the family, bring you into the fold, without a lot of effort and straining. Whereas we've found that it's difficult to integrate into, and I suppose an element of that is, perhaps the small town nature of Yorkton, which is also ironically one of the things that I thoroughly enjoy about Yorkton. Is that it has the amenities of a small city and we can get everything we need, but it's nice to be able to go around and meet people and know people and there's that element of just being able to understand people and I enjoy that factor when the whole town knows what's going on. And I also enjoy the fact that when there's some sort of controversy in the town, that everyone has their opinion and it gets blasted all over the place. That might be perhaps from a professional perspective. As a psychologist, we sort of I'm interested in conflict and when it happens. But yeah, I think the hardest part has been trying to integrate and develop in terms of friendships with people.
We're a little standoffish,
but it's a subtle standoffishness.
Yeah.
So it's. You wouldn't be able to say it's standoffish because everyone is perfectly civil and perfectly polite, but it sometimes feels superficial.
Surprises?
In psychology, we have terms called cultural fit and cultural difference. And it's sort of two sides of the same coin. And so cultural difference talks about, how close the culture of the host nation is to the culture of the immigrant. And then cultural fit is how close the personality of the individual is towards the culture of where they're living. A surprising factor has been how similar the cultural differences, so the actual cultures in terms of Canadian culture and interactions is very similar to South African culture. We talk about stereotypes a lot, so Canada has that reputation of being very polite and very, very friendly and very opening, and that's very true. And South Africa has a very similar approach to things. Perhaps it's a knock-on effect of being colonized by the British. We're all taught to just smile and do what they tell us because otherwise they're going to attack us. And then cultural fit-wise as well is, I think, the fact that our plans for my wife and I that we'd been planning to come for a while is we'd been making changes in our own expectations in terms of what to expect and how to find a way to make ourselves fit in. Because there's that aspect of integration is that hard effort that comes from yourself to integrate into the community. You can't expect the community to change to accommodate you.
Yeah.
And so I think coming with that attitude beforehand that, okay, we're going to have to find a way to, keep aspects of our own heritage here, but also to adapt and change things so that they're appropriate for the environment that we're in. Yeah.
You played rugby back home?
Cricket and soccer.
Cricket and soccer. Okay,
yes,
not rugby.
Not rugby. I'd actually left South Africa just before high school. I did my high school in the Netherlands, so I missed out on the rugby aspect. Cricket and soccer, I did a lot of those, and that's been an interesting thing that I've thoroughly enjoying is trying to just teach myself and learn about new sports. So having to learn the rules for football, learn the rules for hockey. I'm not going to lie. There was a moment in the last Stanley Cup in the playoffs when I finally realized how the offside rule works. and
little different than soccer.
Yeah, and then suddenly I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense now. Now everything just sort of falls into place. And trying to incorporate ourselves into that, and also we talk about small town. I mean, do take Yorkton and thank you. You have the terriers, and it's important to support them, and so we try and go out to a lot of games, and also things like that. So I mean, trying to teach myself how to understand the rules of ice hockey, so I can actually engage in conversation with people about ice hockey.
There is a fairly significant South African community in Yorkton. Most of them seem to be in the medical profession.
There's the South Africans are in the medical profession, and the South Africans that are in farming. My wife has been quite instrumental in that, finding ways to integrate and meet those different people, as well as also government structures. So the Newcomer Centre, the East Saskatchewan Newcomer Centre was really good in terms of getting us in contact with other people from South Africa that we met when we first got here. Also, subsequently, as other South Africans have arrived, they've got them in contact with us as well, which has been quite nice. Not just integrate for yourself, but to help other people to navigate the same thing as well as you've been going through.
Prachi Patel landed in Yorkton in 2017, having earned her Bachelor of Commerce degree in India, where she lived in Ahmedabad, a city of about 6 million when she left now 9 million people in the northwest part of the country. She came to further her education in the area of human resources, which she studied at what is now Suncrest College, then Parkland College. For the past 3 years, she has worked in HR at Grain Millers. She married Daval in 2022. He works on the railway out of Melville, and they are expecting their first child in May.
Back in 2016, 2017, I was in my final year for my Bachelor's of Commerce. And as I was looking for graduating and I was thinking of further education and higher education, I looked at options back home for what was available, what the pay would be, and what my career path that I wanted it to be. So when I was evaluating my options, I decided that maybe I want to try going to a different country, go for an adventure, see what's out there. As we've all heard back home in India, that Western world, they pay well, there's a good balance of work-life balance and whatnot. So I thought, okay, let me see what's out there. And I evaluated different options between different countries like Canada, United States, UK, Australia. I picked Canada out of all my different options based on pros and cons. I would say my life in India was really good. It was not decision based on that the life wasn't very good. Like I grew up in a really good neighborhood, really good city. It's a very developed city. I had really good friends, really good family. It's just I wanted an adventure. And that's why I decided to come to Canada. I wanted to always have a career in human resources. I was looking at different options at the time. I wanted to pursue master's in human resources But at the time, you needed 4 years of education to qualify for your master's. And I only had, like, back home, the bachelor's is for 3 years. So I wouldn't qualify for a master's class. So I thought I would apply for a year of postgraduate diploma and then go pursue my master's. So for that, I was looking at different colleges and different options out in Canada. And somehow I came across Saskatchewan and Parkland College in Yorkton. It was the first college that I applied for. I got in and I'm like, okay, well, that's where my adventure is. Didn't look at many options, and that's how I came to Canada, to Yorkton.
So when you were doing all this research, did you research the weather?
I did. Yes, I did. I did. So I'm a person who usually runs hot. So I was looking for cooler climates. Well, I didn't know it was going to be that cold. But I did. Yes, I kind of knew what I was getting into, but not quite yet, because it's quite different than, what the internet tells you.
Yeah, I suppose you must have spoken English before you came to Canada.
I did, yes. So I did study through my entire education in English, and even my bachelor's was in English as well. So through school, yes, like, I did speak English. The only thing in India is you do study in English, but you don't communicate in English. So you wouldn't have a conversation with your friends or your family or anybody in general in English. So, like, it was when, you started to plan to come to Canada, and when you actually got here is when you actually started communicating in English. But I did speak English.
What was your first impression when you came to Yorkton? What was your first impression of Canada, life here?
This is my first impression. I remember I was in a cab. I drove down Broadway, and my first reaction was, is this it? I did not realize how small Yorkton was at the time. I could not believe a city could be that small at the time. That was one of the biggest shocks, the size of the city. Like, I know I did my research. I knew that it is going to be small, but I didn't know how small it could be. So that was my first impression, but obviously, you can't go by your first impression. I did land in Canada in August. I didn't go anywhere else. So Yorkton was the first place that I actually seen in Canada. So obviously it was a big shock. As you said, coming from a big city, it's like realizing, where am I? Why is it so small? Like, where are all the people? Where is everybody? Where is the public transport? So it was really a huge cultural shock at that point.
But obviously you've adapted. You're still here.
I did. Yes, definitely. Again, as I said, that was my first impression of Yorkton. And obviously, the age matters too. When I came to Canada, I was just a 20-year-old looking for an adventure. Obviously, at that point, looking at the size of the city and the amount of people around you didn't really look like an adventure. But, once your school starts, you meet people, you go to work, you meet people, you learn a lot about the community, what's out there. You adapt, and your opinions change over time. One of the biggest struggle that I think a lot of people, just like myself, would have faced was the lack of public transport. Yorkton being small, it was easy to walk everywhere, which is what I did for the longest time. Obviously, there was a public bus, but it comes at like once every hour and you have to wait for it. It just wasn't as convenient. So, like, come winter, same thing. I was balancing, my school, my studies, and at the same time, I had a part-time job at McDonald's at the time. So walking in winter, the lack of public transport was one of the biggest challenges. Boy, have I slipped on that ice way too many times. Once I graduated, being in India, researching about the job and the pay and the career that I picked, it looked very favorable at the time. It was like, okay, I'm going to be in HR. Once I graduate, I'll have a really good job and everything will be great. But then when I actually graduated, there were no jobs in Yorkton for human resources at all. If there were jobs, they wanted you to have at least 2 to 3 years of experience, but as a new graduate, you don't have that. So that was the biggest challenge. And we all have bills to pay, so you do what you have. So I continued to work at McDonald's for many years. I made it here finally, so I can look back and be like, okay, it was all worth it.
Stories about immigrants are personal for me. I arrived in Canada with my parents, two older brothers, and an older sister 68 years ago from Netherlands. My oldest brother and my sister, both in their early 20s at the time, wanted to go to Canada. The family decision was made that we would all go and keep the family together. I, being 10 years old, was not asked my opinion. My mother was quite reluctant about the idea. But one fine day in August of 1957, we boarded a KLM Super Constellation airplane and came to Canada by way of Iceland and Newfoundland. Transatlantic flights back then, with stops for fuel and food, were pretty much a 20-hour overnight journey in those days, but definitely better than 5 days on a boat. There were no government programs to assist immigrants back then. There was no support. Immigrants were on their own. The arrangement that had been struck within the family was that the adults would stick together for 2 years and pool their earnings to get the family on its feet. I would go to school. And that's what we did. My father had given up a high-level sales and management job with a grocery store chain. He, along with my two brothers, got jobs sanding furniture in the Lippert Furniture Factory in Kitchener. My sister, a nurse, worked at the sanatorium. Instead of going into grade 5 in September, I was placed in grade 2 because I didn't know any English. With the help of teachers who spent a lot of time tutoring me, I moved from grade 5 into grade 6 at the end of that school year. Because I was Dutch, the assumption was made that I must play voetbal, or soccer as it is called here, and I became the goalie for the school team. The field we played on behind the school was paved with asphalt. I was told, mercifully, that I did not have to dive for the ball. We started this podcast talking with Laura Ben-Bontau, and we'll give her the last word.
I really think when you uproot yourself and plan on living in a very different culture, a very different country, different culture, different lifestyle, you gotta come in with an open mind. That's it. Like you gotta be willing to learn new things. You gotta be willing to have new experiences. They will not all be good. That's for certain, And it could be just because, you're unfamiliar with those experiences. But if you come in with an open mind, as immigrants, there's nothing that we can't overcome. And I'm a great believer in that, The thought that you have made the decision to live the life that you know behind and come into a very new one, that means to say that you're a strong person, So you couple that with a very open mind, a lot of positivity. There's nothing that you can't overcome. If things doesn't come your way right away, that doesn't mean it will not happen. It's probably because, you just have to approach it a bit differently. And I don't want to sound like I'm preaching and all, but as I said, I've been an immigrant twice over. I've had a lot of experiences and not all of them were good. But I have to say, I can confidently say that I feel like I'm blessed with where I am right now. I'm not there yet, but I feel like things are shaping up where I would want them to be. And the only thing that I could think of that what I'm doing that is helping really, get me where I am today is because I've always approached everything with an open mind.
Watch for and listen to another podcast in the next month. Visit yorktonstories.ca to hear this and all previous podcasts. And there you can also sign up for our email list so we can notify you when a new episode is available, and you can support us with a donation, if you so wish, to help defer the cost of the technology that makes this all possible. Thanks again to Harvest Meats and Grain Millers for their support, and thank you for listening. Your comments and suggestions are welcome. Get in touch through our website or by emailing Dick, that is DICK, at yorktonstories.ca. Join us again for more Yorkton Stories.